That brings us, George, to press the button, FotMob Corner, where we're going to have a transfer flavour. We're going to talk about, for me, the most sought-after January loanee, surely. A main character of the EFL for 18 months now, current joint top scorer across the 3 leagues with 15, but at the moment, and today I dare say, training with Aston Villa at Bodymore Heath. I'm talking Louie Barry. George is going to tell you guys what makes him so special, and I'm going to talk to the fans of 6 championship teams that I think he would suit down to the ground and finish with the team that I'd like to see him join. So go on.
Yeah, it's interesting timing for this as well, because as of this morning, he's been linked to Derby County, which I think was a pretty big surprise for anyone that's following championship football. No disrespect for Derby, but I was assuming that Barry would be going to a team knocking on the door of the Premier League. And you look at the success that Aston Villa have had in signing Morgan Rogers from Middlesbrough. My assumption was that they'd be kind of using that similar test, send him to a Middlesbrough, a Leeds. If he can prove that he's of the requisite quality to dominate at that level, then he'll be ready to come into their first team next season. And there's no reason in my mind why he won't be able to be. Maybe he'll go to Derby. My understanding is that it's not by no means a done deal, and therefore we can still speculate as to where he may end up. And looking at his loan this season at Stockport, and I think it's also important to remember this as a guy who was brilliant last season, often playing through the middle, almost as like a second striker for Stockport in a front two. He had a really bad knee injury, a serious knee injury, and the fact that he's been able to come back at a young age and continue his incredible exploits at a higher level is so impressive. 15 goals in his 23 games so far in League One this season for Stockport, starting 22 games, just the 2 assists. Looking at his shot map, it's interesting because his role for Stockport this season definitely changed, and he is now every bit that inside left player. It's becoming almost the position that it's almost the new striker, where quite often now the biggest goal threat in a team will either be a right-footed player playing left wing or a left-footed player being right wing. It's probably one of the biggest quirks of how football has changed in the last 5 or 6 years, I would say. And Barry is absolutely that now, playing off the left-hand side, always encouraged to cut inside onto his right foot. But his shot map is surprisingly left channely. Like, there are still way more shots being taken from the left half of the box and from the left edge of the penalty box. But I was amazed to see that he hasn't taken a single shot this season outside the parameter of the penalty area, which is so rare for players like that. If you go and look at someone like Portia Sainz, or you go and have a look at Morgan Whittaker and you see their shot locations, often it's going to be from wide areas, and yet Barry is consistently making sure that he's getting into more central positions in order to take his shots, which is probably why he's got such a good success rate in doing so. He's a really good finisher. You look at his shot placement as well. He can score goals in both areas, often in the corner, with a really good accuracy for finding the target too. He's someone who generally is going to, I would say, will outscore their XG, because he's a very good shooter from range and a very good finisher. 15 goals this season from 9.57 XG, and I think 11.5 expected goals on target. So performing well there. I think the creative side of his game will also improve too. We can see that his expected assists this season is 4.11 as per FotMob, so only 2 goals scored from 4 expected assists, 22 chances created. So a player that has maybe suffered in terms of his creative numbers based on his teammates not being able to finish, rather than him not providing the ammo to do so. But a really good ball carrier and someone who can create as well as score, and a very, very good dribbler, and someone who can consistently get and drive your team into the box, as can be seen by 114 touches in the opposition box already this season. That is what you're getting in from Barry, and as I've said before in the Monday pod, I don't really understand why. Obviously you've got a higher level of defender and fullback to get by, but this is a transferable skill, and I think if Louie Barry is given to a side who are going to be on the ball in advanced areas consistently, such as a Leeds or a Borough, I see no reason why he wouldn't be able to replicate this ability to ghost into the box from that left-hand channel and get shots off. That is what he's all about and what he's been so successful at doing. He's also energetic. He works hard off the ball. He's someone who can lead a press really well and win the ball high in high areas, and will consistently kind of put the work in, as well as being someone whose obvious main facet is in possession. And it was interesting to see that he's obviously left Stockport now. His last game was meant to be in the game against Birmingham on New Year's Day, but he had a hamstring injury in training and therefore couldn't take part in that game. But you look at their Stockport shot map at home to Mansfield on Saturday, in a game where yes, they've got a few players out injured, but there's just a dearth of kind of decent shot locations, especially from that left-hand channel. And you wonder, had Barry been playing it, surely would have looked very, very different indeed. And a final point before I hand over to you is just about his career progression, where it's quite strange. You don't often see players with this kind of loan career. He burst on the scene obviously at a very early age with his time at Barcelona at La Masia, and then his goal against Liverpool in the FA Cup during COVID, when basically the whole country was watching Aston Villa send out a team of kids against Liverpool, and Barry opened the scoring. You and I were in the green room at Sky that night. I remember very well. And he was sent out on loan to Ipswich, which was probably a level too high. He then went to Swindon and did pretty well, went back to MK in League One, and again kind of struggled to really consistently make an impact. And it looked like there was nothing at that time to suggest that he was going to be a player to dominate these leagues. And even at Salford after that, he was a useful player, someone who was certainly decent, but there was no signs that he was going to have the impact that he had. And I remember, again, you and I were together when he signed for Stockport, and both of us were like, all right, okay. It doesn't strike us as being one of the signings of the summer, but you can understand why they've done it. But what he's done at Stockport in League 2 and then League 1, I think shows that we have to have more patience with young players. Again, you look at Liam Delap and what he's doing at Ipswich this season, a player that I'd basically written off after his first couple of loans, and having watched a lot of him, just didn't really see him having the ceiling or the ability, or basically the raw ability to do what he's now doing. And it's a lesson, I think, to fans and to us and to everyone else that development goes at different paces. And for Louie Barry, it took 4 or 5 loans for him to get the kind of move that was needed in order for him to really showcase what he's all about. And I see no reason why that upward trajectory should change, so long as they choose the right move for him now.
So I've gone through the whole of the Championship, and frankly, I think every club should be in for Louie Barry. But there are some maybe more than others. You mentioned Leeds, and I'm looking. They've got Solomon, they've got Ramazani, they both joined in the summer. They don't need another right-footed left winger, even if he'd be a nice thing to have. So here are 6 teams that I think are interesting. Blackburn Rovers would be one. They have proven themselves over a number of years to be, an excellent developer of loanees, and they've had Harvey Elliott, for example, among others. They also need a boost, I think, at the moment. They need goals, for sure. They are the lowest scorers in the top half. And off the left at the moment, they've got Cozier Dewberry, who's another loanee, who's had some bright moments, particularly in the last couple of weeks. But he's a left footer, so maybe more suited to playing off the right. But Tyrese Dolan is drifting into those right-sided areas at the moment. And even though Dolan's right-footed, he doesn't seem as comfortable playing on the left wing. They've got Cantwell in the 10. I don't think he wants to play left wing, but I could see him and Barry linking up nicely. Hedges as well, another option there. I mean, Barry would learn a lot of out-of-possession stuff under John Eustace. He would do quite a lot of defending, and that might be a benefit to his development. And of course, he could still be involved in a Championship playoff scrap and be playing in big games at this level, important games, and developing that experience as well. Swansea, they're a team who build through the thirds, and actually 1v1 wide players are so important to deciding whether their attack is dangerous or looks really stale. Eom, the Korean wide player, is decent, but is not amazing, and particularly his goals and assist contribution this season has been poor. I would be pretty worried about a left side of Louie Barry and Josh Tymon defensively, but that's as much down to Tymon as it is to Barry. But certainly, his strengths do not lie out of possession, it's fair to say. Then there's Hull, who are obviously in a relegation scrap. Do you want to send a player to a relegation scrap? Well, maybe. I mean, Ruben Sellers is so well thought of when it comes to young players from his time at Southampton, and now obviously with Reading and Hull. And I think they need this profile of player. You mentioned Mason Burstow, and having been impressed by him, he's playing left wing at the moment, and I don't think it's ideal to have Burstow as your left winger. Obviously, the injury to Miller means they are just light with right-footed left wingers. So I think that could be an interesting one. But I want to see him in the promotion battle. I want to see Barry, the main character in the EFL, or one of them over the last 18 months, involved in a Championship promotion battle in the next few months. And I think another benefit of moving to a likely promotion candidate is there's then the strong chance of a permanent move and Premier League starts and minutes next season if they win promotion, maybe as part of the loan deal. We know that clubs, elite clubs are quite happy happy to sell this type of player at the moment in order to raise 10, 15, 20 million quid to help them buy the 50, 60, 70 million pound players. I'm looking at Omari Hutchinson at Ipswich as a good example of what I'm talking about here. So I'm looking at Middlesbrough, and whether they need a left winger depends on how good you think Bergzorg is, and I don't think he's particularly good. I'm not a fan personally. Riley McGree obviously plays off the left sometimes. He's not the same type of player. He's not nearly as direct. And I'm trying to imagine Ben Doak and Louie Barry off the wings, and I would love to see that. But Doak obviously having a lot of interest from Premier League clubs like Crystal Palace recently. Sheffield United I'm looking at as well, just because they are lacking depth. Gus Harmer's been playing incredibly on the left wing this season, but what if he gets injured, or what if he's needed in the centre of the park? I don't think they have a player of this profile to play off the left, and I think he'd learn plenty from Chris Wilder and Alan Knill. But I think the answer is Sunderland. Now, this might be dead in the water because Sunderland are not that keen on loaning other teams' players, but I do think this potential to have something in the contract where there's a big buy price if promotion is secured might appeal to them and their recruitment strategy. And look, at the moment you've got Romain Mundle and Tommy Watson both out injured. You've got Al-Shish in from the cold playing left wing currently. He's not a killer, Al-Shish. He's a nice player, he's easy on the eye, but he's not a killer, and I think Barry is. And Barry is basically the closest thing to Jack Clarke, other than maybe Tommy Watson and Romain Mundle, that I can really think of. I think he'd thrive playing for Sunderland. And I think, being involved in a promotion shake-up, experiencing massive games at the Stadium of Light, potentially playoff games with a ton of pressure as well, could be huge for him. And then purely tactically, because I'm a pragmatist, they've got that solid left back, whether it's Adji Elise, whether it's Dennis Serkin, they've got sturdiness at left back. They don't need the left winger to be hugely diligent defensively because they're always going to have that really strong left back behind him, and I think that would suit Barry and allow him to thrive. So Sunderland and Louie Barry for me would be an incredible fit. I have no idea if they're interested whatsoever, but that's what I'd like to see. And it's been fun talking about this exciting young player using the FotMob app for data and visualizations, the video on our social channels if you want to see those visualizations, and do download the FotMob app, link in the show notes for that.